Welcome to Goodfellas History. I'm one of your hosts, Davis.
I'm Garrett.
And I'm Nick.
And this segment, we're going to be talking about the Haitian presidential assassination that happened 3 days ago. Very interesting stuff, actually. It has a lot of different, kind of political echoes that are happening across the country because of this. But I'm going to start. This is from CNN. We're just going to go down to kind of what exactly happened because not a lot of people seem to be really talking about this yet, which is interesting because there's a lot of political ramifications that this could lead up to. So this is again from CNN. It says, what we do know is that the acting Prime Minister Claude Joseph said that President Moise's home was attacked at around 1 a.m. And he was killed. His wife was injured. And here's what's interesting is there were three kind of like servants that were there as well. They were just tied up and just kind of left in there, like untouched. So the people really were just gunning for the president. The group consisted of 28 people. 26 of them have been confirmed to be Colombians. And two of them actually are from the United States.
Oh no.
We're going to get into that a little bit, but this actually has led to a lot of different kind of conspiracy theories that are popping up because nothing's been like certified yet. However, there was a shootout that led to three of the Colombians being killed as well. They burned three cars and there was police fire in the streets. And then the rest of the group seemed to break in. What's wild is how they were able to get in so far because it was coordinated, but a lot of it was brute force. They actually shot through the door's locks instead of like trying to break down doors and stuff. They actually just riddled the doors with bullets to open it. And yeah, kind of insane. There's, as I said, a lot of conspiracy theories about this. We do know this. The two Americans that were detained so far, there's a big age difference. The first one is Joseph Vincent at age 55 and James Solages at age 35. What's interesting about this as well is that they've actually been only coordinated their attack in English and Spanish, which is not spoken in Haiti. It's French. So it's believed to be completely outside politics. The Haitian government hasn't really released anything yet. And that's led to even worse conspiracy theories on this because we just learned this as well. One of the opposition leaders who is now up for a possible presidential consideration, he hired two DC lobbyists 2 days before the assassination as well. So people are wondering if it's like a CIA thing, but no one knows why the CIA would get into this. Mm-hmm. And there's just no one knows really who's involved yet. Like they're trying to uncover it. 5 people that were involved with this are still at large. As I said, 3 are dead, and the rest have been taken into custody.
Well,
so it's kind of like a wormhole. Yeah.
Does the prime minister or president, did he not have like a secret service kind of,
He did. And sometimes it actually gets up to 100 people in his guard. These people just kind of just burrowed their way through. Like no one knows how they got past yet. As I said, there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been released on this. All we know is that 28 people burned 3 cars in the private mansions on the way there and still were able to get in. And as I said, it was coordinated, but it was just brute force through. They used bullets just to get through the doors and they got to the president and killed him. He was shot 12 times.
Do you know, because they were using such brute force to get in, I'm assuming it was at 1 a.m. I imagine that it woke him up. Does he not have a
security
escape tunnel or a bunker?
So from what I'm seeing, it was in his house. There's no escape tunnel on this. As they said that he was shot in his bedroom.
Okay.
So I don't know if he somehow slept through bullets and whatnot.
I mean, that would probably be me, honestly.
I get that, yeah. It's just, as I said, there's not a ton of info released on this yet.
Yeah.
But all we do know is that they were using different the non-native languages to speak. Mm-hmm. And we do know that there were U.S. people involved. However, I personally want to say I don't think the CIA was involved in this one. The president, and this is kind of getting into the conspiracy theories and why this could have happened and whatnot. We do know that the president of Haiti wasn't the best. I don't think he was like completely far right, but he wasn't far left either. So he wasn't like one of the socialist like presidents that the U.S. usually tries to oust. He was kind of a dictator. He did have like a plan for succession,
Well, he was also
but
amenable to U.S. interests in Haiti too, so like this would have made no sense on an
yeah.
imperial
So and
rule.
that's why I want to say that's actually what I was leading up to is I don't think the CIA was involved because he was open to like U.S. interests though. So it
So,
makes this like extra weird.
so one of the things I think right off the bat, the fact that these were Colombians, were the two Americans detained of Haitian origin.
So it hasn't said that yet, from
It,
what I can find.
from what I can tell from their names, it sounds like they probably do have some Haitian
I don't think so because like Vincent, I was like, that's
last name of Vincent. That's a
mhm,
like that's a pretty French last name.
possible because
And
James Solages, like that one sounds very French to me. But I was like, the other one is Joseph Vincent. I'm not
Joseph
sure
Vincent
yet.
is definitely a uh, very French.
Yes, that
Uh,
could be it then. I
so
don't, as I said, I don't want to like
I
go down too many of the conspiracy like
so
rabbit holes with this.
what it sounds like this was a mercenary group.
And that's what I was going to say, is that the U.S. is actually known for a lot of different mercenary groups just because when our veterans get back oftentimes, they don't have like clear like job outlooks. A lot of the times they do become mercenaries for different
So
groups. So they could have been hired out for
so
this.
these Colombians really sound like a mercenary group from Colombia.
Hmm.
Um, a good way of thinking about like the modern world in the Caribbean and in South America, particularly in Colombia, um, Venezuela, is think of feudal Europe with a modern democratic veneer. So a lot of the really powerful interests in places like Colombia have private militias. And these are people that are dedicated to them, kind of like how like lords back in ye old Europe had knights and men at arms to serve them. So it could be possible that this opposition guy um, could have hired out these
It's
mercenaries just to.
definitely possible.
So what's interesting to me is that um, I think that you're right that the CIA probably didn't have a hand in this, but the CIA is not the only imperial power that the United States uses in situations like this. The real question is, the fact that they got a hold of two U.S. lobbyists. These are not people that are directly connected to the United States government, so I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure there were corporate interests that may have wanted to get this guy eliminated, and they probably supplied the resources to help provide that. But I mean, but that's just like spitting in the wind, though.
Yeah,
Until
it
there's more
definitely is.
information.
As I said, like it's very interesting though because this is what I wanted to kind of lead up to. Is currently now Haiti's in kind of a power like vacuum.
Yeah.
There's three separate like parties now that are all trying to like vie for the presidency. There's the current like acting prime minister who was basically put into place by the assassinated one. But there's two other groups that are like vying for power with that. One of them was actually put in by their kind of like judicial system, like he was nominated for it. And the last one is, I don't want to say he's part of like anarchy groups, but he's more of like a from the people kind of put like placed forward. And so
So,
all three of these groups are like now like fighting over this.
that's interesting.
So they don't have like a line of succession then?
So he as I said, Moyes did like put forward like the person he wanted to succeed him, and that's the
Yeah.
person who's acting right now as the prime minister. But there are two other groups that are saying that he's not official, and they're like, this is our candidate. And like the judicial system of Haiti put forward their own candidate as well.
So,
Okay.
what's probably going to end up, like, I don't know, like, this, once again, doesn't really sound like, I don't want to defend the CIA,
Hmm.
but this doesn't really sound like the U.S. doesn't really have a vested interest in chaos in Haiti right now.
Hmm.
So I don't
I
know.
100% agree on that.
I don't know. Like if this guy was like a Hugo Chavez type, I would put money down that the CIA was involved in it. But the fact that this guy has been in power for so long, and he's made it very clear that he's open to U.S. interests in Haiti. I don't know, like, once again, this is kind of like the chaos of the Caribbean and South America. This sounds like some strings were pulled, and that the power brokers inside Haiti were trying to find a way to get rid of this guy. And like, I really want to know what kind of like weapons these guys had, because I mean, it's clear to me that they had training, that they had skill. The fact that they were able to efficiently do this meant that they were aware of the predicaments that they were in. And the fact that they did it as quickly as they did, I mean, these guys probably have some experience of doing this. But it sounds more like a kidnapping turned into assassination. Because a lot of these Colombian militia groups, these mercenary groups, are actually hired to do just that, kidnap powerful people.
So yeah, basically, it has been confirmed that whoever did this, they were like professionals. Like they knew what they were doing. Like the prime minister has come out and said these guys were like efficient and effective. Like even though it was like brute force to get through the house and whatnot, they did it quickly.
Do we know what kind of weapons they had?
So for the most part, it was like automatic weaponry and whatnot. Like as I said, they were able to shoot through like door locks and everything.
AK-47s, Uzis, probably some pretty standardized military grade equipment. That's the thing. That's the bitch of this. I mean, like I think that it's really hard to tie them to anything because those weapons are fairly available to virtually anybody in that region.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why I think this kind of puts like points towards mercenaries. Is that while it was like standardized like equipment and whatnot, it was like still different sorts of weaponry.
So you're saying that you said 2 Colombians were killed in a shootout?
It was 3.
3? Okay. And it was after he was assassinated, or was this before or
No,
during?
this was actually on the streets. They like there was 3 people that like they were in the street still, and they had a shootout with the cops while the rest of the group went in.
Well, yeah, so okay, and that's police. That's not like the security of the president.
And so far, they really didn't like fight security from what I'm seeing here.
That's so like flabbergasting to me. I don't know if like because I mean I just looked at a photo of the presidential palace, and it's a really big thing, and you see soldiers like patrolling it. I'm really surprised that there wasn't at least one person injured while they were.
So the only person who was injured was the president's wife.
That's so weird to me.
So this is why this lends credence to them being professionals, though, is they probably hit it when maybe there was like a changing of like the guard or something as well. They probably hit it when security was at like a minimal levels.
Well, also, then they would have to have insider knowledge of the schedules.
So that's the thing. That's the thing that adds to this. So this sounds more like the powers in Haiti wanted to get rid of this guy. And I think that they just wanted to get rid of him. So that's why the 2 other political parties sound like they're not conceding to the prime minister right now. And so what it really sounds like to me, like a mafia hit almost. They took out the Don, the shot caller, and like I'm pretty sure with that kind of knowledge that they had to know which doors to hit, what direction to go. They had to have some kind of detail of the presidential palace to know where the guy lived, what time of night that would be best. So I'm pretty sure that this was an inside job. I'm pretty sure the more that we investigate this, the more likely it is we're going to see that there probably were security detail leaders, heads of staff that probably were on the dole that gave out the information.
And that's actually what really led to me wanting to talk about this, is because like we see so many times where is U.S. like interventionism, where we just are like putting our hands into a lot of pies and whatnot. But I almost think because we've destabilized so much already, that this kind of is like an inevitability that like now countries are destabilizing themselves further. Like I really wish that it would be more. I'm trying to think of like the right wording here. Basically, I just wish that we could have stayed out of like a lot of regions in the first place, because now, as I said, there's a current power vacuum going on. I feel like a lot more people are going to be killed down the road as well because of this.
I'm of 2 minds. Like, military and political-wise, I don't want us to be directly involved. But trade and economic-wise, like, I think the U.S. can be involved in these countries. The real problem is the sovereignty of those states. And so the United States, the key thing that we often forget, that U.S. imperialism in South America was driven by economic interests, of course, but it was largely economic in nature.
Yeah.
The only time the United States military really got involved, particularly when we began this imperialist project, was when the interests in question, the U.S. interests in question, felt that their interests were threatened. And the United States would come in and basically depose the government that was threatening those interests. Oftentimes they actually didn't depose that government. They would just seize the interested areas, the land and the resources, or they'd blockade them. They'd take over the ports and force the government to change its policies. So, I mean, and that leads to disruption because the government was doing this for a reason. So it's a capitulation to U.S. economic interests permanently is what was enforced. And once again, this kind of actually points to, the Cold War as a problem. So in the 1930s, FDR did his damnedest to try to change U.S. Relations with the Caribbeans, with Central America, the Caribbeans, and South America to have more of a collaborative economic effort. And this was called Marxist and Socialist by all sorts of people.
Of course.
But it really wasn't until the Kennedy administration that the United States went back to a far more imperialist doctrine of interference and involvement. We just did it a lot more shadily. A lot of this was supporting those militia groups that I talk about. The reason why so many of these militia groups exist and why they're so good is that they were trained by our special forces. So there are Green Berets and all sorts of special ops Americans that would be sent to South America as contractors to basically train these militia groups to overthrow these governments and to support governments. And they train them in all sorts of military behavior, but they also come with CIA agents that were trained in torture techniques. So what's really, but that's the reason why this is kind of like it's the chickens are coming home to roost kind of thing. This has been almost 60 years of this policy being in effect, and it really hasn't changed. It really never changed since the Kennedy administration. And right now, it's like this is what happens when you destabilize it. Same thing with what's going on in northern Mexico right now. These are the results of economic realities, of social realities.
Yeah, and so I guess that's why I want to talk about it, is because there's so many different conspiracy theories popping out of this. I'm like, we really want to be careful about where we're assigning blame currently until more news comes out. But this has been a very sort of interesting turn of events that's going on.
Well, and because I just did a quick Google search just to kind of look at it, and it looks like some officials in Haiti are calling for U.S. Involvement, and a lot of Haitians are saying, no, we don't want that. I actually want to read this quote because I do think it's interesting. So Monique Kleska, a Haitian pro-democracy activist and former United Nations official, said on Twitter, we do not want any U.S. troops on Haiti's soil. The de facto Prime Minister, Claude Joseph, does not have any legitimacy to make such a request in our name. No, no, no.
And I actually think that that's completely justified, considering how we've seen a lot of this.
History. Yeah, this article really also goes into that.
There really is no reason for us to get involved. Unless things get so out of control and so violent where there's just slaughters happening, I don't think that's going to happen.
Especially if two of the assassins were from America. I mean, I don't think it's completely unfair to, for the people to be like, well, two of the assassins were from your country. I don't know if we really want more involvement from you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Honest to God, I think that it probably would be wise for us just to stay out of it. The real question is what do we do moving forward? And the Caribbean's a whole other deck of cards, but
yes. As I said, I do actually want to delve into the history at some point down the road with that, just because I'm not as well versed. But I do think it would be it's just fascinating to see how we got to this point. I did actually just pull up an article that just got updated as well. This is interesting. It turns out about a dozen of the Colombians that were involved with that were former soldiers.
Not hard to imagine.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like that they may have been tied to a lot of gang-related violence that's been rampaging through there.
The thing. So once again, like, no nation exists in a vacuum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Haiti is a major port country for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
They also are a major port for illicit drugs. There's a reason why New Orleans and Florida receive a lot of cocaine and other drugs from Colombia. Haiti's probably a major port for that.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be funny is that what the real conspiracy that I actually see here is U.S. business interests that are actually invested in the Colombian drugs cartel being upset at this guy if he was disrupting that and just wanted to eliminate him.
And I think that could definitely be it. I do want to point out that's probably why they were speaking the majority language as Spanish as well. So that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, whew. Yeah, that actually sounds like this guy was... But once again, it just shows how powerful these drug cartels have gotten. And this gets into, once again, our drug war. So the reason why these drug cartels are so powerful, our trade agreements make it really hard for national economies to develop in these regions. People turn to illicit trade as a way of gaming the system or surviving the system, depending on how you look at it. And guess what? In the United States, there's this very lucrative drug that you can make a lot of money off of. So, yeah. You know, these militias are very powerful. Like, I'm not kidding when I say that these guys are like lords. They're like lords in medieval Europe. These militias are usually ex-military, ex-police. They're well connected, and oftentimes these mafioso-esque cartel guys operate like dons in the ye old country. I mean, this is just Sicilian politics.
Well, before we cut on this one, I do have a question then, because if it is like cartel related and whatnot, how do you guys think that we solve kind of like the drug war crisis and whatnot? Like, what are your opinions on that?
We decriminalize all drugs.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I think that would be extraordinarily effective at handling this.
Two things that would solve a lot of these issues is decriminalizing the drugs and legalizing most of them. And two, changing our trade agreements with a lot of these countries, like giving them the breathing room to develop their local economies to sustain their populations. That's going to cost U.S. corporations a lot of money, but it would stabilize these regions in a way that would allow for more democratic elements to actually form. I mean,
well, and I also think it would help a good portion of our population as well. But,
oh yeah, like that. But you know, I'm just talking in a general sense, foreign policy wise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the reality is, like, the drug war was always an authoritarian policy to begin with, and it's just so happened to help our imperialist interests in the region because empire is illicit by nature. You know, in the United States, we're the land of the home of the brave and the free. Imperialism, on average, really isn't popular with most Americans. So by its nature, it has to be illicit. So this is one of the reasons why we have so many veneers and so much rhetoric wrapped around on trying to justify this kind of behavior. But, you know, like I said, 60 years of doing this is a deep rabbit hole, and it's going to be hard to tether that out. And one of the ways of resolving the issue is disempowering these militia groups, these cartels. Problem is that the United States empire is heavily invested in these groups, and I have no doubt that the corporate interests, or Wall Street, or whatever you want to call these guys, probably have a vested interest in these regions too. They're probably double dipping.
And don't we provide a lot of their firearms?
Oh yeah,
we do. We're a huge exporter for that.
You know who the number one purchaser of illicit Soviet armaments was after the collapse of the Soviet Union?
thought it was us, wasn't
It's
it?
us. It's the
Yeah,
United
I thought it was
States.
the U.S.
But it wasn't the United States government. It was just U.S. citizens,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes shielded by the U.S. government to basically procure these arms and then sell it to regions that they kind of just, siphoned them to areas that we wanted. There's actually a really good movie Nicolas Cage is in. It's called Lord of War. And it actually kind of does a good job of depicting this. It's the arms trade and how this has basically become an illicit market sanctioned by the United States government. But the United States government will never openly sanction it because it's illicit. But we're doing it as a way of basically arming rebels and other groups and regions to destabilize it.
Yeah. Well, we're getting a little into the weeds. As I said, there's not a lot on this right now. Do you guys have any kind of like closing thoughts on like Haiti and like what's going on there?
I think that from, again, just the very small reading I've done during the segment from what you're telling me and the history, that whatever they decide to do, they need to do themselves. And that, these, and like you said earlier, these destabilized regions, I think we're going to see, quite a lot of this before it gets better. And so I think that we need to not fuel the fire anymore, and hopefully they can figure it out, I guess. I don't know if that's a great take to have, but
I think that's fine right now, given what we know.
I would
yeah,
say
given what we know.
I would say that the best thing we could do is not send boots on the ground because it's going to be really expensive, and it's not going to solve the underlying problems. The issue here is not an issue of violence. The Haitian government has a military. There's not going to be a civil war. What would be more beneficial to the Haitians is if the United States sent a aid package with no strings attached, so that they could reinvest it in the country. That would further stabilize the nation, and further stabilize U.S.-Haitian relations. I mean, I think that oftentimes I want the United States to have relations with these countries. They're literally our neighbors. But it's the relationship, the nature of that relationship that's important. And so I'd rather us be an ultra-powerful nation that does not constantly interfere and try to puppeteer these nations, and would rather stabilize these nations and benefit from the economic and trade development that happens there. It makes no goddamn sense for us to try to corner these markets. It only benefits a handful of Americans. It doesn't help us out. So Godspeed to the Haitian people. I hope that they're able to make it through this, and good luck.
As I said, with this, and this is the reason I wanted to talk about as we kind of close this out. I feel that it's important because there's a lot of history of destabilization from the U.S., and this does tee up to a topic that I want to address next week as my segment, which I was leading up to as well, and that's going to be kind of like U.S. interventionism and the drug war. I think these are important.
You're going to have a long segment this time.
Yes, next week I will definitely have the long segment, but I kind of wanted to bring this one up first, just because this is just a mere shadow of a small portion of this.
It's the tip of the iceberg.
But it kind of came at the perfect time for it. It's unfortunate to see. I really do wish the Haitian people the best of luck. Don't fall into too many conspiracies on this. We just need to take this as the information comes out. Just kind of keep your eye on what we can and learn what we can from this as well.
Occam's razor, people. The most simplest answer is most likely the answer itself.
Exactly. Well, thank you for watching Goodfellas History. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.